Today, I have a slight agenda change. We are going to do other business, item number 9, after item number 6, before we move on to our case today. So I'm going to start with the roll call to my left.
William Pearlstein.
Jan Conacy.
Fred Townsend, Board Attorney.
Edith Herron.
Mark Saunders.
And Barry Brandt. I'm going to go through the public notice and verification and correspondence. And was the meeting and public notice properly posted and the public notified?
The agenda was published in City Hall and on the portal on October 17th. It was amended and reposted on the 18th, the 21st, and 25th. The public notice was posted in City Hall and on the portal on October 3rd. It was sent over to the newspapers, published in the Cape Gazette and Delaware State News. Mailings were sent out to property owners within 200 feet, and signage was posted on the property.
Thank you, Ann. And just to reconfirm that we did not receive any public correspondence for our case today, correct? Thank you. All right, I believe we have one notice of decision to approve. Did everyone on the board get a chance to look at it?
Is that the one on Scarborough?
Yes.
Yes.
No, I've been gone all morning, so I did not. I saw it come in, but I haven't had a chance to read
Okay.
it.
So there's a copy here if there's an opportunity to scan it. And if you're not comfortable signing it before the meeting adjourns, then that's fine. Bill, do you want to take a look at
I'm
it?
going to have to look at it. I'll look at it on my iPad.
Okay.
There, you can look at it.
All right, well, you can do either.
Okay. All right, at this point, I
Oh,
want,
and one other word, if I may.
Yes.
The notice of decision for the recently heard Bellhaven case is very close to being circulated. So I expect it to be sent to you, and remember to comment directly to me and not to the others by end of day Wednesday. And then it is lengthy compared to some others, so there might be a little bit of a process getting it out. But there's an effort being made, of course, to get it out as quickly as possible. Thank you.
thank you, Fred. And one other item I want to say, I may say it a couple times today, we have received feedback that our speaking is not clear and into the microphones, and this is from ourselves as the board and also from the public. So we may stop and ask to speak slower, speak clearly, so we get everything on our recording. The public is not able to hear us all the time on the recording. Okay, with that, I want to move to the other business. And the first item is the re-execution of the rules of procedure for the Board of Adjustment. Did everyone get a chance to look at the rules?
Yes,
Yes.
and I have a number of comments.
Okay.
I don't know, do you want to go by section or do you want to go by person?
We can go by person.
Okay, do you want me to begin?
Yes, if you would like
Okay.
to start. Thank you.
Okay, on page 1, under agenda, I didn't know if the phraseology was correct on the last line there. The specific ground to grounds therefore isn't, I don't understand what that is.
Where is that?
Under definitions
The
first.
definition. And wouldn't therefore be an E on the end anyway, but I don't, maybe that's a
And the specific grounds therefore, so.
specific ground to grounds, but what's ground to grounds? I don't know what that
No,
is.
there are some surplus words in there.
Okay,
It should
that's what I
be
thought.
specific grounds therefore.
Okay, and therefore would have an E on it, correct?
I think so, yes.
Yes.
Okay, that was all I had on page 1. On page 2, item 1.2, the order of business, the word should be may, not can. May be altered.
I agree.
If anybody disagrees, let me know as you go
no,
along or whatever.
go ahead.
Okay, 1.4, line 3, the presentation may be suspended by approval. Don't we say continued? I'm trying to get the right wording or understand, because we had a continuance just a meeting or two ago, and we didn't really say suspend. I didn't know if there's a specific word that should be used there in those. Fred, maybe you can help us with that.
I think, Bill, you would agree that suspend and continue could be used interchangeably?
Okay,
In that case,
then
yes.
leave as is. Okay, great.
Okay.
And under 1.6, number C, correspondence read, we're, it's corresponding that has been acknowledged, correct? Because we're not really reading it anymore, because we're asking if people have seen it, as we just did a few moments ago. So I would say correspondence acknowledged rather than read, but that would be up to you folks as to what you think.
Mine says noted.
Well,
Is it?
I don't know, the
would-
one that I got
Minority
from,
fine? Okay.
from Fred on the 9th of October said read. So
Okay.
what would you say, what would you guys think?
I'm fine with acknowledged.
Yeah.
Acknowledged or noted, either one's
Yeah.
fine with me. I
And
think,
there's no rule against reading it,
Right.
but I think you just want more flexibility. If you get something that's
That's what I was-
particularly long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in general, we don't read it if it's been sent in advance and it's part of our agenda. And then on 2.3, the last one on page two,
see.
hours is not possessive. So it'd be 48 hours notice. There'd be no apostrophe.
Okay.
That's page 2.
you know what?
2.2?
No,
The
it's
time?
2.3.
You missed one. 2.2, the time.
Yeah, the time.
2:30.
With the time, right.
I know
Yeah,
you didn't miss that.
Yeah,
So we're going to make it
1:30.
1:30.
1:30.
yeah.
I think I have the same one Mark has,
Right. I
which,
think,
which was last year's, where it's noted and not acknowledged.
I think there are a couple versions that have been circulated. Or that-
So it's good we're going person by person, because those of you who have a different one can bring up things that you see that I may not have had on
Well,
mine.
we should pick out one that we're going to use. We shouldn't have different versions.
Yeah, acknowledged.
So if we're going to use,
Right,
Yeah, but I think Janet's right. We don't know what other changes are in these two different versions.
so can we agree on a version that we're going to use and we
Can I see what you have there?
this is the one
This is
Fred,
the one.
I have the one Fred sent me on the
And I
8th
have
of
the one
October.
that was sitting here.
So where did this
which-
one come from?
That came from last year. I printed it.
Okay. So they both have the word procedure misspelled. I don't think there's much difference between what I've got. If I could leave with one of these and get the comments we get on the other, I'll be careful to incorporate them so there's no distinction.
Well, you can use compare and merge in Word and take a look and let it show you
You
what's
can have
different.
that, Fred.
Oh,
if
I
you
can
want.
have it?
Sure, you can have it.
Okay.
Fred, I want to make a comment on 1.6, the correspondence acknowledged. I've always had issues with emails that come 10 minutes before
Right.
the meeting. So I really like acknowledged or noted, because I think as the board, we do require information in advance of our meeting. So I think the fact that we say acknowledged is appropriate. I mean, in other words, if it comes 10 minutes and you get a chance to read it, it shouldn't be held against the board. If it's the last bit, I would hope the public would come in and speak to it, not just send an email to Ann 5 minutes or 10 minutes before the meeting.
Well,
So,
having lived elsewhere at once, it's sometimes very hard to do that. But so acknowledged takes care of both
Yeah.
everything, or noted,
Yeah.
as it was in the
Thank
other ones,
you.
either one.
I didn't have anything on page, I'm to continue, Barry? Okay.
yes.
I didn't have anything on page 3, just except to ask, does 5.5 strike everyone correctly, using an adverb? 3 affirmative votes shall be required to overrule any decision, ruling, or determination of any official charged with enforcement of Chapter 270 zoning or the city code, or to approve any special use or exception or variance. Do you feel, I'm not questioning necessarily, I'm just saying, are we sure that this is exactly what we mean?
Well, let me ask you something, Fred, maybe ask Fred. If you only have 4 people there, this only addresses if you have, so you have to have 3 people agree whether there's a quorum or not a quorum. I mean, whether there's everybody in attendance or still a quorum, but not everyone.
That's the way we operated when Mark was off.
Exactly. We had
said
4.
needed 3 out of 4.
Yes.
Meatloaf song, 3 out of 3.
So there are 3 different scenarios where we could have a quorum. We could have 3, in which case it would be unanimous. And we would probably invite, as a courtesy, the applicant to stay their petition until another month when we could have a larger complement to give them a better chance of success. If they felt like they would do better under that scenario, we could have 4, which would also require 3, because the alternative, I guess the alternative could be,
Tie.
it'd be 2-2, but it also could be 2 with an abstention. But most boards, not all, but most of these boards will generally require that a quorum of appointed members vote in favor of essentially changing the law for a particular property or overruling a decision.
Well, 5.3 doesn't say that it's an appointed. It says when a quorum is not present. It doesn't say quorum of appointed members, Fred.
Well, a quorum is a quorum. A quorum is a majority of the appointed members.
Right.
You could have a majority of a quorum, which could be 2 votes and 1,
2 and 1.
2
I
and
see.
1, and somebody could sit out or something.
Well,
So
5.5 definitely needs to be there. I just wanted to be sure that it said exactly what we wanted it to say.
the alternative would be to say a majority of those in attendance. And the argument there is that it should require more than as possibly few as 2 people to grant a variance or overrule the decision.
Okay.
So this is the more conservative version.
Let it stand, everybody?
I have no issue with it as written.
Okay. The 4th page, 4.2, I think there might be a few.
You going back?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I go for? Oh, then I skipped that. I'm sorry, I skipped that page, excuse me. 4.2, about halfway down, the sentence that begins, however, if an item, any item. Okay, I think there's some words missing. However, if any item requested to be placed, this says to placed, so to be placed on the agenda that is not, because it's an item is, not item are, is not, in the opinion of the board within its jurisdiction or which is not met, does not meet, not do meet, does not. So it's, you've got verb subject agreement and a word left out. So to be placed, that is not, which does not.
And Mark, you had it, yours.
Right, it was corrected,
It's
right?
corrected,
We
yeah.
corrected it
Okay.
last
Okay.
year on.
Okay,
I'll circulate this again, and
Okay.
we can vote on it at the next meeting,
okay, then
after the
the
changes.
page that begins with 8s, I don't have anything. The page which begins with 13s, I have a question again for clarification on 14.2. Nothing about wording, just content. All appeals and applications shall be accompanied by a survey by a licensed surveyor at the subject property, except when this requirement is waived by the board or building inspector. I think we've been leaning toward the fact of really wanting to see the surveys, and Matt's done a terrific job, his office, in giving us those like the ones what we have for today's case with the all the notations on them. But this is giving some wiggle room to say that it can be waived, or do we still want it to say that, or do we want to require?
Matt, and when you receive an application, you look for a survey, and you look for pictures and things like that. Do you, in the case where, in a case that you recall, have you not gotten a survey in recent times, and have you asked for one and been told that, well, that's going to cost $800 and it's not really necessary, and then do you feel like you can make a decision as to whether it should come to us or not?
Well, I think if the application concerns lot coverage or expansion beyond what a survey currently shows, then we would definitely require a survey. There
Like
have been
height, for
instances.
instance, would that be an example where you wouldn't necessarily require one?
Well, height, we would have to get basically a baseline set, if you will, so that we would know that future construction wouldn't go beyond in certain scenarios. I guess It's really applicant dependent, application dependent on the type of application that is there. I'm going to say 98% of the time, we would say we would want a survey, but there are instances out there that may not require one to be submitted.
So this statement is good. It leaves the wiggle room for you to make the determination.
I believe so.
I just wanted to have that discussion among us here. And then 14.6, another clarification, any substantial material should be submitted at least 10 days in advance of the hearing. We'd love the heck of that, but that doesn't always happen. I mean, how, that's 14.6.
Shall.
Shall.
I think it shall.
It now says shall. But I guess the question is, we're not enforcing it.
Right, that's exactly,
And
that's
the question
exactly.
is, should we shorten it and enforce it?
Well, frankly, 10 days in advance is not very long in advance to take the time. And some of the material that we've had is extensive.
Understood.
And so I think we should enforce it, frankly.
But but if you're enforcing it, then you have penalties or you have
Well, the
something that
penalty would be
happens.
you can't have your hearing.
Well, the penalty would be the material couldn't be considered.
Okay, recognize Ann, Secretary.
Referring to submit it to the city or submit it to the Board of Adjustment?
Good,
I would say city.
good point.
Okay, 10 days prior to the meeting, submit it to the city. He has to have time to review it.
Right.
We all do. That's the thing. I don't think 10 days is enough time for everybody to do what they have to do. I mean, if you have something that's, relatively simple, which we occasionally do, or you have something more complex, and 10 days isn't enough time for the building inspector, it's not enough time for the board, frankly, to review it. I thought we had talked earlier this year about trying to get things to us more than like 4 or 5 days or a week in advance.
I think what,
And we have, I know we have.
Yes,
I
you
think it
have.
makes sense to talk with Matt about when does he need it? How much time does he need? And then when do we have it?
After that.
And that to be with anyone who files a notice with this board gets a copy of those rules. That's, and I would, ask that whether it's the building inspector or Ann or whoever it is who gets that, to say, here are the rules. If it's 30 days in advance, you have to have the materials to the building inspector if it's 20 days before the hearing. So you have 10 days, and then we get it 10 days before. If you can't meet that, it's going to be next month. And I think absent a real emergency, I just think we have to start enforcing it, because it's not fair to this building inspector, and it's not fair to us, because we're not, we get some of the stuff that's 150 pages long.
We added a few years ago to the application process, the request for photographs. Could this kind of language that Bill is talking about be added to the application?
I wouldn't see why not, but then it comes down again to the question of enforcement of that scenario. How many countless times have we seen additional information submitted at the meeting itself?
Correct.
So I don't know that we'll ever get rid of that scenario itself.
I would agree.
But I think if we would set something in stone as far as the rules requiring the Board of Adjustment meeting and restrictions, I think if it would to state that you would be removed from the agenda and possibly placed on the next occurring agenda or a future agenda, I think I would keep it open and just say a future agenda.
Right.
It may light the fire, but we don't know.
Yeah, I
until-
would say future, because you don't want to say next in case Ann has 3 or 4 already lined up. They may have to go to after.
Right,
Okay.
right.
And my thought is also that the duty that the applicant has is to submit the materials to the city. The applicant has no control over when they come to the board. They don't even know who they wouldn't know how to get anything directly to the board anyway. So I think that's probably where the rules should stop, and then we just cooperate, the city and the board cooperate to get us prepared as soon as possible.
But I think if we start enforcing the 20 days before the hearing to the city, and then I don't know whether our rules could say that, the building inspector will endeavor to get the materials to the board, 10 days before it, whenever possible or something would be.
don't think we need those.
Okay,
I mean,
that's fine.
Yeah, Matt will get it to us as soon as he can.
Okay.
Because the size of the project could be simple, could be extremely complex. So,
We typically try to get it out the door as soon as possible. As soon as we deem the application successful, we try to get it out so to give you as much time to look at.
now on the flip side of that, if it takes you, up to 3 or 4 days to protect us, what do we have to say, look, we're not going to make it. We need to give the board, the planning commission gets a long time to review materials. We would need at least a minimum of, I would say, 7 days and maybe not 10. If it doesn't get to us within 7 days, we might have to then ask for, not a continuance, but a rescheduling of it. We could leave that to you to make that call, working with Ann and say, look, we just can't. And I mean, historically, there's only been 1 or 2 cases where it's come in really tight, where we've needed time, and I've heard from 1 or 2 board members to say, look, it's not enough time. So hopefully we don't get into that kind of situation.
Well, Ann is very good about, I mean, we get items, it seems to me, as they come in sometimes, and things get added, which is why I guess there's amended agendas. So, but I depend greatly on Matt's report, on the building inspector's report. It helps me understand the documents a little bit better. So that's like crucial. So I do agree. If we can't get the reports in a timely manner because the material didn't get there or it's complicated, then we need to be able to.
And I do agree with what Jan is saying here. The fact that Ann gets us the information out as early as possible, we get a jump on it before maybe your report comes out. So that is very helpful, to me. Okay.
What do we do with 14.6? Anything? Nothing?
Well, is it up to the,
To 20 and
to the
And say
city?
to the city.
To the city within 20
20 days.
days. Or there'd be possible continuance.
But the shall be submitted,
Okay.
that's the rule.
Okay, all right.
Edie, did you have a change of 14.4? Because I think there's a word wrong there.
If I missed it, then you go for it.
It's,
Yeah, there is.
yeah,
So 14.4, let's see if it's right on this.
I don't think it is. I think it's the same issue. As it would be heard.
Do you want to read it, Bill? So
Applications or appeals received 30 days prior to the month.
Application.
The application or appeal would be heard and found to be complete by the building inspector as far as practical, and if scheduling permits, be heard the following month. Does that read differently than yours?
No, that's,
Yeah, I don't understand what it says.
Applications or appeals received 30 days prior to the month of the application would be heard and found. Yeah, I don't,
a completed application, as long as it's received within 30 days, shall be scheduled the following month as long as it's practical to do that.
that's what it's trying to
That's,
say.
well, it does say that, and it's grammatically correct as far as I see, but that doesn't mean it's understandable.
But you have the part about would be heard and found to be complete?
Yeah,
That's
Oh,
what I'm,
okay.
yep.
that's what I'm.
That's the part I don't understand
Well,
what that
it's,
means.
to take out the clause, not Santa. Applications or appeals, just take out the rest, say, let's see,
You see
would-
30 days.
And found to be
found
complete.
and found to be complete by the building inspector shall be,
sounds
far-
like, yeah, it sounds like the would be heard should be after the finding by the building official instead of before. I think that would help.
That would clarify it.
Or just take it out completely.
Take it out,
Yeah.
yeah. What do you need it for?
so we've got applications or appeals received 30 days prior to the month the application, and would be heard, correct?
Correct.
Or application or appeal would be heard.
I thought we took that out.
No, would be,
And replace it with the
Which
word
are-
is.
How about which are found?
Yes.
which,
Which are found to be complete.
so you're taking out would be heard? But they're saying it's saying that it's received 30 days before it would have been heard. that,
Well,
Yeah.
I think it makes, if you take out, and you just say found to be complete,
okay,
complete as far as practical and if scheduling permits be heard the following month. That seems logical to me.
I think it is making 2 points.
Yes,
One is that if
yes.
it's timely, it's going to be heard, and if it's not timely, it's going to be heard the following month. And there could be.
Maybe there are 2
that could be
points.
That language could be improved to be made much more clear.
Yeah.
So I think I've got my task.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Bill.
I don't know how many years of higher education this group has in account.
And English classes and clauses. So what we changed, we were going to 14.6. Any substantial materials shall be submitted at least 20 days in advance to the city,
Right.
correct?
Correct.
Oh, no, in advance of the hearing, wait, let's see, any shall be submitted at least to the, submitted to the city. How about that?
20 days.
At least
Yeah,
20
well,
days.
okay.
You
Any
got it.
substantial material shall be submitted to the city at least 20 days in advance of the hearing. Is that what we've all agreed?
Agree.
Okay. And I had a quick question on 14.7. It was just a disconnect, because here we're using the word continue, and I think we want may also in there. The board may, at its discretion, well, no, you have may, continue. But see, we used,
Continue
we
and
used
suspend.
continue and suspend, and I didn't know if we should use the same word, or we're indicating that they are synonyms by using one place and one the other. I don't know if it matters. I just noticed that we were using the word, different words.
I think I can make them consistent.
Okay. So that, all right. I had, just a minute, I had nothing on the next page, and I only had a couple things on 16.2 on the last page. Third line, I think you want opposing party of record, if any.
Yes.
The motion to the opposing party of record. And that was all that I had. Hardly anything. Now it's somebody else's turn.
Mark, you have any?
I have one, and it's more of a thought than an actual English assignment. We had the case recently, and it's rare, and we may never get another one, but in case we do, where there was a property that was affected, although I'm talking about the Baltimore Avenue property that was affected, but it wasn't. It didn't have to be acknowledged on the signs and the notices that we give. It didn't have to be noticed. So I would just suggest on 3.3,
Just a minute, please. Okay.
the line that says lies within a 200-foot radius of the boundaries of the property subject to the appeal or application, and I would like to add, if people would agree, or is directly affected by this appeal, or other words to that effect. So that a property that is affected by it would also be noticed by way of sign and 200-foot letters.
How do you define affected by?
Well,
Well, how about impacted?
impacted,
same thing.
something strong. I mean, not, you know,
Well, I
mild.
have to agree with Mark, because of course I agreed with him on the decision. And then to top it off, WRDT, or whatever that station is, RDE out of Ocean City, interviewed somebody on Baltimore. This person had absolutely no concept of what had happened, because she said, oh, I think it's probably, she said, I'm not sure, but it seems like a good thing because we'll be getting more foot traffic onto our street. She had no idea of you know, how it was going to impact. They're not getting foot traffic, and unless it's a valet at the hotel.
At the October 18th meeting, the discussion was had by the commissioners sitting here, several discussions of interest, but one of them was that there have been, Patrick Gossett acknowledged that there have been several cases that he's heard of through the grapevine, I guess you could say, where other companies or large concerns that are going to be coming to the city are looking for parcels to buy for that specific purpose of putting them together. And we may have that same case come again where off-street parking.
I think we are.
Yeah, I'm not
Okay.
sure, what time.
All right, well, anyhow, get back to this then. That was just a thought that we may want to add it. The properties affected will also get signage.
So property affected concerns me. I think there's a way maybe to address your concern. And I might need some time to come up with the language.
You'll take care of it?
But
That's fine.
properties affected, that's a big, that's
I know.
part of our
Yeah.
normal test and
Right.
consideration is, whether there's any substantial impact on neighboring properties. So, but what you're saying is if it's a multi-property application, then we may need to add some additional notice requirements. And I'll see if I can come
Something
up
along the
with
lines
something.
of for any property referenced in the application, something to.
And it may never happen again. but-
Correct.
Any redevelopment of associated properties or something like that.
Well,
Okay, Mark,
That's it.
that's it? Jan, you good? Bill?
I'm done.
Good, okay. My change was caught by Edie, thank you. Okay, so at this point, Fred, you will make the changes and then submit that, and we would then approve them at our next meeting?
We can sign off on them, and we're going to scan them and circulate them and make sure there are multiple copies of those around for future use.
And then we would confirm them next time then, not this meeting.
Not
Okay,
this one.
okay, great.
I suggest for the, we date them, so that, because we've had multiple copies
Yeah.
floating around.
Yep,
Good point.
very good.
Okay, moving on. Want to talk about the future Board of Adjustment meeting. The December meeting would fall on the 23rd of December this year. I would like to propose to the board a combination of the December and January meeting. My proposal would be to conduct a meeting on January 13th to, just combine the 2 months together, get it away from the holiday season and get it early in January. I will not be available on the 27th, and January 20th is a legal holiday. So that's what I would propose.
I mean, I would, if you want a second, I agree with you.
Talk about it. yeah,
Okay, I can't have, I'm having surgery on the 21st of January, because we had talked roughly about that one time. So the 13th would work very nicely for me.
That's great. And I want to confirm that we are still doing November 25th.
If there is
November.
if there is a case.
Yes, yes, it's always that.
Okay.
I think there is a case.
Okay.
And
all
it's a
right.
case we've heard before, right?
So November 25th
Oh,
is.
no, okay. Never mind.
November 25th is on.
Mm-hmm.
When we're saying nothing in December, but Monday, January 13th will be a combination of December, January situations. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Does that work with Ann's schedule?
2 in November.
Pardon?
I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with the January idea, Barry.
Okay.
Then
Bill,
how-
your thoughts?
So it works for me.
Okay,
How much farther do we want to go ahead, Barry?
let's,
Do we have any other changes?
yeah, let's, hang on, make sure.
Has
Ann
Ann-
was
has
good with
Ann-
that? Ann's good with the January 13th meeting?
I'm fine with that, but I won't be here for November 25th.
Do we have a fill-in for you, or would you have a fill-in? Could we have the meeting? Okay,
Okay, all right.
thanks. Okay, did you want to go further into February and
We
March?
can or not. I just
No,
was wondering what you wanted to do, because I thought you'd indicated there might be a conflict for you at another
Yeah,
time. but-
I will not be here for the February and March meetings. Jan would
I will
be
be
the
here for
chair.
February and March.
Okay.
I just discovered that I can't go for long
They
car
stay the
rides or
fourth,
plane rides
right,
for
the fourth
90
Monday.
days.
So as far as we know, and this would still be February 24th, as far as we know, and March would be the
24th.
24th as well.
Huh.
As far as we know.
Can all other board members make those two meetings?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you.
Question on the December date, if we have determined one?
There isn't
No, we're
one.
gonna
No
skip it.
December, yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Just going to January 13th.
Okay. Any other discussion on meetings? Okay, let's move on to election of officers. Every year, we reappoint the officers. Jan as vice chair, myself as chairman. Hear a motion?
Edie is
on-
secretary.
Thank you. Edie is our secretary. Thank you, Jan.
I make a motion that we don't change a thing.
The two of us.
I was
second.
Yeah, right.
Because we know whose head the crown will fall on.
And, this is an intelligence test. Saunders and I
This
agree.
is where we
that
need
that's a
the
really good-
quorum here.
2 ends.
Yeah.
So I guess we can't have a majority vote if we can't vote.
Right. Yeah.
So I think, unless any of the rest of you have an alternate suggestion, then I think you can just simply consent to that slate of officers.
Okay.
Does anybody have anything other than that to offer for consideration?
No.
Okay.
I would ask one thing. I would ask that Mark and Edie and Bill, when you get home or sometime soon, check your calendars and make sure that the 224 and the 324 both work for you.
I brought my calendar with
Oh,
me.
okay.
Oh,
All right. And you're probably online with
I'm
your
an uber
calendar.
detailed person, as you well know.
I know. Okay. I just want to be, because if one of you isn't here, then there is no meeting.
Right, no, I'm good.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you to the applicant for letting us take care of our housekeeping items. Moving on to our case.
Okay, I'm going to make a statement.
Okay.
The case involves number 7 Lake Avenue. That is a almost adjacent neighbor to my wife and I think given our proximity to the subject property, I think it's advisable for me to recuse myself to avoid any appearance of personal interest or lack of impartiality. So I've discussed that with board counsel, and I believe it's the right decision to make.
Okay, thank you, Bill. So today we have the one case to hear. The board will apply the quick check factors that Delaware law recognizes as guidance for boards of adjustment. Under Delaware law, an applicant for an area variance must prove that the requirements create an exceptional practical difficulty. To determine whether an exceptional practical difficulty exists, the board must weigh the following 4 factors: the nature of the zone where the property lies, the character and use of the immediate vicinity, whether removal of the restriction on the applicant's property would seriously affect neighboring properties and their uses, and finally, whether failure to remove the restriction would create an exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the owner's efforts to make normal improvements to the property. This standard is satisfied only when the difficulties alleged by the owner are practical rather than theoretical and exceptional rather than routine. Everyone who chooses to speak today will be required to give their testimony under oath. I will ask our counsel, Mr. Townsend, to administer the oath. We do not have a court reporter, so if we ever have to create a transcript or even for the public to listen in, we want to ask that please keep your voices up, speak directly into the microphone, no crosstalk, please. If at any time we hear this or we're not speaking up, anyone here will simply say, stop you, and we speak up. And is anyone here from the public going to speak today? No? Okay. We have no one. Okay. After the applicants, after the building inspector and the applicants have finished speaking, we will close the public participation of the meeting, portion of the meeting, and we will then move to a board discussion on the case. And I just want to let everyone know that occasionally you will see board members using electronic devices. They are only using them to like zoom in on a diagram blow up. They're not using it to do any kind of communication. So with that, we're going to go into our case today for 7 Lake Avenue. Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and you guys know what's coming next. Happy Monday. Before you today is case number 0924-11, 7 Lake Avenue. The applicant today is Jay Mossman of 303 Freedom Court, Newton Square, PA 19703, and he is the owner. The applicant is seeking the variances from 27042 structures in required side yards, in required yard areas, and 27082 enforcement of chapter, which will become evident as we go through the meeting. The nature of the request today is the applicant, Jay Mossman, is seeking a variance to 27042 structures in required yard areas to allow to remain as constructed a recently created front stair and landing encroaching 4'1" into a required front yard setback during a new house build. The property is located at 7 Lake Avenue, Rehoboth, Delaware, 19971, and is situated in the R1 residential district. The property is listed in Sussex County tax records, as tax map number 334-14.14-4.00. The parcel is a standard 50 by 100 lot and contains 5,000 square feet. Background information is as follows. The previous single-family dwelling was demolished by permit in March of 2020. A building permit was applied for in November of 2023. The permit was issued in December of 2023. As part of the approval, the applicant was given approved documents at the time of permit pickup. The documents included an approved site plan, which I have labeled and shown as Building Exhibit A, showing the approved limits of structures for new construction. A final inspection was completed on September 10th, 2024, and a survey was submitted I have labeled as Building Inspector Exhibit B. As part of the requirement to finalize construction and issue a certificate of occupancy for the new residence. At that time, the applicant was instructed to remove the front stair and landing for compliance or seek relief through a variance request. Variance requested information is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the following ordinances. 27042, structures in required yard areas. It reads, no structure and no part of a structure shall be erected within or shall project into the required yard area, except the following. A, cornices, eaves, gutters, chimneys, steps, or entries projecting from the main structure no more than 24 inches. And B, fences and screens subject to the provisions of Chapter 270-43. The newly constructed landing and stairs encroaches 4'1" into the required front yard setback requirement. Therefore, a variance of the same is required, and again shown on Building Inspector Exhibit B. And then 27082, enforcement of the chapter plot plan. The building inspector shall enforce the provisions of this chapter. The building inspector shall require that the application for a building permit and the accompanying plot plan shall be submitted in paper form and in digital format acceptable to the city, and shall contain all the information necessary to enable him to ascertain whether the proposed building or structure complies with the provisions of this chapter. In addition to other necessary data, the plot plan shall show the location of all existing buildings or structures on abutting land within 50 feet of the side or rear of the lines of the premises of the applicant. The structures constructed in the front yard setback that are shown on a submitted survey are not zoning compliant. If the board approves the variance request, the submitted survey shall satisfy the requirement and this section no longer applies. However, if the variance request is unsuccessful, the applicant shall perform all necessary property revisions and submit a survey showing zoning compliance. The conclusion is as follows. The unauthorized construction of the additional landing and stairs into the front setback requirement has created zoning compliance issues in that it has placed structures into the required setback. For the structure to remain, the Board of Adjustment must grant a variance. If no variance is granted, the applicant shall cause the construction to be modified for compliance and a final survey showing compliance with all zoning requirements submitted to close out the open application. Glad to take any questions you may have.
I have
One second,
questions.
could I do a clarification? As you were reading, Matt, I think you may have quickly misread. You said 4.1 inches.
Pardon me,
I
4.1
think 4
feet.
feet.
Said feet.
4 feet.
I thought he said 4 feet.
It does say 4 feet 1 inch, but when he read it, he said 4.1 inch.
Okay.
I mean, 4.1. Yeah.
All right. Let's go to you, Jan, for your
Yes.
questions.
Thank you, Jan.
To make sure I truly understand this, so when they applied for a building permit, this extra 4 feet 1 inches was not included, correct?
Correct.
They just went ahead and did it without coming back to the city, kind of, let's do what we want to do and ask permission later? Is that,
That's not a question for Matt to answer.
Okay, so I just want to make sure they did not come back to the city, they just did it.
No application was presented to modify what was approved in the initial approval.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That's all you're.
That's it.
Okay. Go ahead, Edie.
Okay. Your Exhibit A, and thanks for the notations on these. That I assume that the Exhibit A was site plan. The site plan was code compliant, correct? In all measures.
Yes, so I did not do the review for this application, but
Right, I
this
saw.
document was provided by the reviewer to show the compliance was met.
Okay, especially the steps that are shown here, and the stone walkway or whatever is done here. How were do we know how the steps and landing or whatever they had there shown in that picture? I'm dealing all right now with Exhibit A. How were they elevated? Do we know?
There are some existing site conditions that I think the applicant will speak to probably from the construction process, and I think the site conditions made this appear to be the right fix. Not saying that it was or wasn't, but I'm saying that no application was presented to have this construction in that yard to get approved.
Okay, I think I didn't speak as clearly as I should have for you, Matt. I'm saying in this drawing, how were the steps and landing going to be handled for this?
Thanks.
I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear to you,
Yeah,
excuse me.
That's no problem. So as shown on Exhibit A,
Yes.
Building Exhibit A, it allows, which is perfectly code compliant, 2 steps that are no more than 12 inches to project off of the proposed porch, as well as the sidewalk that is shown there. So we would have, in inspection, we would have been expecting to see the exact same as what has been approved from the documents.
Okay. And since the stone walkway, it looks like a stone walkway. I know this is only not a three-dimensional drawing, extended to the sidewalk. Again, only in A is the one I'm talking about. Were they just counted against natural area and lot coverage? Is that they weren't counted as structures? There weren't any issues about those at that time?
Yeah, as far as I know, there were no coverage issues with
Yeah.
this presented. They wouldn't have gotten a building permit unless they would have satisfied all the zoning requirements at that time.
Okay. Next question. Was floodplain discussed as part of the building permit process? I noticed that there's a note about floodplain both in this lower left big black box and also in the upper right red box. There are talks about the floodplain. So was that discussed as part of the building permit process?
Yes, because the house is situated in a floodplain, it has to be built to floodplain requirements.
Okay. What exactly does AE 11, excuse me, require? How much is requirement and how much is a suggestion in construction in AE 11, that's the correct floodplain, right, for this
It is,
property?
yes.
Okay.
So the requirements differ from zone to zone. Specifically for AE 11, your bottom of your first floor needs to be located above the AE 11-foot indicator, and then we also, the city of Rehoboth Beach, also adopted a 1-foot freeboard ordinance. So take a foot, add it to that 11, you're looking at 12 feet is what we require the measurement to be.
12 feet from,
12 feet from center line of road, or excuse me, from mean sea level in the case of flood zones. All of our measurements are taken from center line of road, and you have to imagine that this property sits above zero as it is.
Okay.
So with that being said, they may or may not have had extra requirements to build to depending on the site conditions as they existed. In other words, the site may have already been sitting higher than what was required as far as the elevations, but that's what the survey shows and proves to us.
Okay. So there were floodplain discussions, or
Yes.
at least evaluations done at the time of A.
Absolutely, and as because it sits in the flood zone, there's other requirements to close the project out as well, mainly a certificate of an elevation certificate. Excuse me, the term lost my mind there for a minute.
So the applicant, i.e. Ann Turnstone, his architect or construction person, was fully aware of what was involved in AE 11 at that time.
Well, that's a question for the,
Well, okay, I'm sorry, as far as you knew, as far as
I
you
can
knew.
say that the submittal met the requirements for the floodplain.
Okay. Then I think Jan has already asked this question, but I want to reiterate it. Did Turnstone or the applicant indicate at any time between December 2023 and Corey's September 10th inspection that a design change to A had been made, i.e. steps or anything else? Did they make any contact with you, your office?
Not to my knowledge, no.
so
Okay.
Matt, you said you didn't do the review, right?
I did not do the review. I performed some of the inspections on the site. I did not perform the final inspection.
Right.
To your knowledge, there were no alterations in the plan?
Correct.
Is Turnstone's, in your opinion, as you know, part of the packet is a letter from Turnstone, a one-page letter that was page 9 of the packet. Is Turnstone's assertion of flood zone constraints in this letter accurate and binding, or is it just a suggestion? What is accurate in terms of what has to be done in an AE 11?
So,
Because they're saying walkway is not compliant due to the number of steps it contains, but
so
steps isn't
I
anything.
think what they're saying is the elevation requirements in the flood zone raised the house to a certain height, and the higher the height, the more steps need to be constructed in order to bring you to the ground, because each step can have a rise or fall of only so many inches or whatever it is. So I think that's the point that the applicant is making, and the applicant will have an opportunity to discuss that further. They're saying because of the height of the house, they needed a longer throw, or whatever the term is, to get you to the street level or sidewalk level.
Since September 10th, has the applicant offered or discussed with you any ideas as to alternate landing and steps ideas?
Me personally, I can't speak obviously for Corey, but I have not had any conversations with the applicant on this matter. I know at the time that the final inspection was held, that the applicant was given information for either obviously repair or remove the zoning infraction or apply for a variance.
Okay. And I'm not asking you what these are, but in your opinion, are there options totally different or modifications of existing construction that could result in code-compliant landing and steps for the property? I'm not asking you what they are necessarily, I'm just saying in your experience, are there options that might exist that could be explored?
I would agree that there are options.
On the application from the, let's see, from the applicant, just a minute, please, let me get it. On the front of the application, they further information, the applicant says, city code only allows for 2 steps 24 inches outside of the setback. Due to floodplain and existing sidewalk, we need 4 steps. Again, their focus seems to be in talking to us in this application on steps, and I understand the connection between steps and height and risers and all of that, but there's nothing in our code that tells them how many steps to have. Correct?
Correct.
Correct. So they're just that was just the applicant's indication. And then on the back of it, or the second page, their hardship is we require more than the stated allowed number of steps, 24-inch projection. So again, it seems that, would you agree that it seems that their thought is focusing on number of steps rather than the projection into the setback per se? Or maybe I shouldn't ask you that. I mean, I'm going to ask many of these same questions to the applicant, so I'm not leaving you out.
I would defer to the applicant on that
Okay.
question, yeah.
Fair enough. Now, if we could go to your number B, your B.
Certainly.
For a moment. I want to make sure I'm truly understanding what you're showing us. And because when I compare, by the way, the house is lovely. So you've done a nice job on it, and we appreciate that you've come to us today and that you've been working with the city. If I'm looking at the front of the house, there's quite a change in from the A to B, and what's actually been constructed. And I want to make sure that as far as the city is concerned, the only problem is the fact that you have 4 feet 1 inch into the setback. Is that correct? That's the only thing that's of interest to the city right now.
That's correct. All other zoning and ordinances were adhered to.
Okay. And the reason that that your your very thorough building inspector's report included 27082 was just to make clear that if the variance isn't granted, that the owner will need to make an adjustment, be it. Is that why that's there? I haven't seen that one before, and it seemed like, as I was reading the materials, we've been in situations before. I can think of one case specifically where it seemed like the alternate for the applicant was either take everything out to get to zoning compliance, and this wasn't part of the case, and I wondered if that's something that you've started including, or if there's a reason that that's there in this case and wasn't in the one a couple of months ago that at least in that respect was similar.
Right, so we found that code section that basically says to these types of applications, applicant has submitted what they consider is a zoning compliant survey. But looking at it, we have an instance here, this is a fine example. We have some additional encroachment that was not permitted, and it goes against the zoning ordinance. So the survey that was prepared for the final inspection, which we require at all final inspections of this nature, was incorrect. So it was not zoning compliant when it was prepared for us. If the board were to grant the applicant the variance request today, this survey becomes valid.
Oh, I see.
The survey that they have presented to us becomes a valid survey.
I see.
If it doesn't, if they're not successful in the variance request and you don't give that to them, then they have to cause the property to become zoning compliant. So that would mean the removal of the items and then submitting a zoning compliant survey after that has been done. So they also vicariously need a variance from 82 if you were to approve the variance to
Oh, I see.
842.
Okay, thank you.
So it may or may not always appear in these cases. It just depends on the circumstance, and there are instances now that we will be including that as a just in case, if you will, as a blanket statement.
That's the way I interpreted it, was something that was kind of found to be relevant and would be included, and that maybe could have been included on another case at another time that had a similar circumstance.
Correct.
Right, okay. I'm almost finished, guys. On your report, the 27042 says steps or entries. Is the landing, the middle landing considered an entry, or what's that considered? Is it just a wide step?
So that would be, if it met the requirements of a sidewalk, which would be 3 feet essentially, it would be a sidewalk. But because it's bigger than the 3 feet that's allowable for sidewalk construction, it's, for all intents and purposes and for arguments purposes today, it's a patio essentially. But but in this scenario, it's more likely a larger landing area in reference to stairs.
Right, I'm referring to this one, this is one of the pictures from the packet. This is, not, I took some, but I'm not using those here at the hearing. So what we have is, this is not considered, this up here, is that the entry? Is
That would be the
that would
entry
be
door.
the entry. And then we have step, and you say that's a patio?
That's well, it's not.
It is. It's
It's
the
a
way they define
landing. It's essentially it's a landing.
A landing.
Right.
So that is not part of the,
Patio would not be the correct term because
Yeah,
you're not
I
putting
understand.
a table or anything out there. So I misspoke on that.
Edie, may I interject real quick?
yeah,
You almost said a sidewalk.
yes.
Is a sidewalk allowed to be elevated in Rehoboth Beach?
Certain circumstances, it certainly can, and you could ramp it down.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Like
So.
a
Okay,
little-
yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So not to step on the applicant's toes on here, but that could be one of the solutions is to ramp a sidewalk down to the driveway, and it would get rid of the landing requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry, Edie, back to you.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No. Well, this is, we do well together, so all of us. So if I'm go back to 27042A, cornices, eaves, gutters, chimneys, steps or entries were the two things that I thought could apply to this particular property. And so what we're saying is there's steps, entries isn't part of it because entries is well within the setback, their entry.
That's right. And in this particular scenario, they already have the 2 allowable stairs that drop down, and then they create another structure with 2 more additional stairs.
Right.
So that's why we're here today.
Yes. Let's see. So their projection is 49 and a quarter inches, an excess of 25 and a quarter inches. Because when I actually read through this, it said 4 feet 1 and a quarter inches. So that's 49 and a quarter. So their projection is that into the setback is actually 25 and a quarter inches. Is that
Yes,
correct?
it's
So
additional.
that's the actual variance they're seeking to maintain this structure, is for us to give them a variance of 25 and a quarter inches so that they can keep all of this as was shown in the picture that they provide.
So the 2 stairs are allowed to be there. The first 2
The
stairs,
first 2.
they are allowed to be there. It's everything else
right.
that is not.
Right. And then, let's see. 270, go ahead, we went over 278.
What's the dimension of that landing then?
The dimension,
Depth of it.
This landing, the mid-landing, or whatever we want to call
the
it.
actual dimension of the landing I have is 4 foot 1 1/4 by 5 foot 4 3/4.
So the depth of it is which of the 2 dimensions?
The depth is 4 foot 1 1/4. So that is taken from the front of their stair, which they would be allowed to have, and then that additional 4 foot 1 1/4 is the landing encroachment.
Okay.
If important, it's 27.57 square foot of coverage is what you're
Okay.
looking at there.
Okay. That's all that I have at this time. Thank you for letting me
Thank
ask
you,
my
Edie.
questions.
I just have one quick question, just one quick one,
Okay.
yeah. Something that Edie said, can you change, can a builder change the plans that have been approved without coming back to the building department and getting, a approval? I'm not speaking of the steps, I'm speaking of the house itself, the structure,
So there are certain circumstances that we work with applicants to allow certain modifications to occur in a kind of normal ebb and flow of a project. When it considers lot coverage, there's really no give and take there. We have to see some documentation provided to us. We can't give a permit out until we deem it code compliant. And this application you would have seen this application prior to being built
Right.
for a variance request, should it have
But you
happened
can
that
move
way.
the kitchen around or move the bedrooms around or whatever.
Certainly.
Okay, just curious, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Mark?
Are there any railing requirements in this project? I mean, it seems to me that there's a lot of steps without any railings.
For this project, I can't say to the porch itself, I don't have enough information there, but for the landing, it wouldn't be. There's a 30 inches is what's required to provide the handrail or railing at that point.
30 inches of what?
From grade, I'm sorry, elevation from grade to whatever that top of surface would be. If it's more than 30 inches, at or above 30 inches, I need to have some kind of protection there for fall.
So that would be like four steps? Because
Roughly-ish.
2, 3, no railing, and then 4, 5.
Only the surface that's elevated above the 30 inches is where the requirement for the protection comes into place.
And the top entry patio, where we have that chair in this picture, looks to be substantially above the sidewalk, more than 3 feet that we normally see. And I understand why it is, because it had to be lifted. But I'm surprised that there isn't any requirement of a railing or a safety device up there. It's a long fall from that porch.
Yeah, I didn't personally take the measurement. That, to me, it doesn't look like it's above 30 inches. They look like they're smaller treads.
Okay.
Or excuse me, not smaller treads, but smaller risers than what the code actually allows as far as the maximum. They look much smaller than that. So really, we'd have to see a measurement on that, but I don't think that that would be above 30 inches.
One other question has to do with the side setback. Where we, on Exhibit B, you see where it says paver deck, 13.4 paver deck on the picture? You're calling it, it's, I think we would call the entrance, sort of right in the middle of the red box. It's labeled paver deck 13.4. Okay, it's, do you have that?
Yeah,
Right there. So
in the front.
Right, in the front. So if steps were to go to the left to that, am I right that they could put an infinite amount of steps from that deck over to the concrete drive without getting into the side setback?
No. No, you would still have so even in that scenario, we're beyond the front setback. So you would still have only that 2-step allowance at that point, and any other additional steps would require some kind of variance or some
Coming
kind
off
of.
the side.
Correct, even coming off the side.
All right. Those are my only questions. Edie asked all the others that I had.
May I ask one more? Again, back to this picture, I meant to ask this one, I'm sorry to come back to you. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm counting 6 steps. If I was trying to get to this entry deck, I would have to take 6 steps, wouldn't I? 1, 2, 3,
4, 5, 6.
4, 5,
Yes, you would.
6. And people
Correct.
keep talking about 4. I understand the 2 that you're speaking of, but are there 6 steps?
I see 6 risers.
6 risers. Okay.
Same language, but yes, 6 is the number.
Okay, but does that impact what we're thinking or doing here today? I mean,
I don't believe so. We still have the encroachment of the 1, 2, 3, the 3 additional risers is why we're here today.
but the 3 additional risers, they're coming out to the side or the front?
The 3 additional risers would be the 2 additional stairs and the landing that weren't.
Right, but they're in the front setback.
Yes.
They're in the front setback. Right, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you. Sorry,
All right.
Barry.
Thank you. Matt, just want to make clarification for the wording in our code. So a front porch is allowed 5 foot into the setback under 270-42. And then steps are not to exceed 24 inches into that. So it would be a total of 7 feet, okay? But it uses the word main structure. So when you use have a porch, that is technically main structure. Is that correct?
Ask me that question again, if you would, please.
I want to make sure that since we have the setback is 15 feet, but then we allow 5 foot encroaching into that front setback.
Right.
And then 2 foot additional for steps,
Correct.
which would technically come 7 foot off of that 15-foot setback. But the code uses the word main structure. So when a company puts a front porch on their structure, that becomes main structure. That
Yes.
is okay.
Yeah, that would be a part of the main structure.
Okay,
Yes,
that's
thank
what
you.
I thought. I just wanted that clarified. And we've been talking about that photograph, the quote-unquote paver deck. That technically is a front porch at that point, right?
One can argue that is it
One-
technically a
yeah, I looked
front
at the
porch.
definitions. You could argue. So okay, so that would be the allowable 5 foot into that setback.
Yes.
Okay, just clarifying questions, and just the porch that's on the right side of the structure is covered. I believe it has a deck over it. That is part of the FAR, correct?
That would be part of the FAR, and you would not be able to include that as part of the open porch, the open front porch credit, because it has coverage above it.
That's what I understood. Okay.
And I should say, let me rephrase that, in that livable, occupiable space above it,
Okay.
not necessarily just coverage.
Okay. Question on porch design, maybe not porch design if that's the right word, but can steps be embedded into a front porch?
I've certainly seen some steps recessed into the porch
Into-
construction.
And that would be part of the porch and not part of the 24 inches, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And just, there is no basement in this property. I would, stating an obvious question, I would think.
I am not positive that. I would let the applicant.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That's all the questions I have, Matt. Thank you.
Just real quickly, Barry.
Okay.
The 200, what they did was take advantage of the 250 square feet credit if you have an open front porch.
Yes.
Okay, I just clarifying that.
I'm sorry, what was that?
That you get, if you have an open front porch,
Uh-huh.
then you can, that's where he's talking about going into the setback. You can have 250 square feet of open front porch, and you get it kind of free above your 3,000 square feet.
The
Yeah.
FAR.
Only for FAR, not
FAR.
for lot coverage.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I was asking.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Matt. And thank you for being patient. And we are going to turn it over to you for your presentation or
So we
discussion.
start with a name and an address, and then I will administer the oath. And then what we try and do the best we can, and we don't observe it ourselves all the time, is speak one at a time. But what I would probably do is swear you both in case there was a situation where it would be just more convenient if one or the other of you answers. Okay, so let's start with you, sir.
I'm Harvey Ryan. I'm one of the owners of Turnstone Custom Homes.
And can you pull the microphone a little bit closer?
Oh, it moves.
Please say it again.
There we go.
Okay, so can you give me an address?
37395 Oyster House Road.
Even
Can you
closer.
state it again? Sorry,
think-
Frank. Could
I
you
think
state it
I
again?
didn't
Yeah.
hear
Is it
anything.
on?
I didn't hear
Hello?
anything.
So part of the problem is that we need to pick this up. So even if we can hear you, if it's not being picked up, it's not going to make a record.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So it's 37395 Oyster House Road.
And can I have your name again, just
Harvey Ryan.
Ryan?
Ryan, R-Y-A-N.
Okay, Mr. Ryan, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And you, sir?
My name is Aaron Bagnatori. I work for Turnstone Custom Homes. Address is 37395 Oyster House Road.
And sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You can proceed with your presentation.
Okay, do you want to start with,
Yeah, so as I wrote in my letter, we were restricted by the floodplain in this instance and did build the floor as close to the flood, as the grade as we could. From that elevation to the sidewalk is roughly 4 feet, which necessitates close to 7 steps. The way we constructed this, we were calling that more of an elevated sidewalk. I think you had mentioned that before. We've had to do that before to make up elevations where we'll have a step and a sidewalk. This was a little bit more so, and that is the reasons that why we didn't resubmit. We considered this more of a sidewalk than a structure.
So when you said that, you were referring to the landing or the whole thing?
To the landing and those 2 extra steps, yes. We did look at different ways to go to it. If we were going to build a sidewalk with a slope, you have to maintain less than a 1 in 12 slope. Anyway, we'd have to go over 20 feet. There's no way to get to or from this place by sloping a sidewalk. So that was where we came from.
Anything else from your your perspective?
I mean, there was a lot of things that took play on this as far as the height of the driveway. In the AE zone, we have to be, along with the elevation of the crawl space and then our flood vents, you know, the exterior grade has to be a certain height on one side of the house, which was on the left-hand side of the house, because the neighbor's house on the right was too high. So in between the two houses, we were fighting with the finished height for the elevation certificate, and as far as the crawl space height, and then the flood vents as well. So that kind of dictated where our grade was on that side, which even in the beginning, from getting the original surveys and the proposed, it didn't work out once the neighbors' lots were taken into consideration. And then the center of the road and everything else, because we're also dealing with the height of the house, not just the AE flood zone. So everything there kind of dictated exactly where that had to be on that front porch.
Okay. All right, if there's nothing else, I want to turn to questions. Let's start with you, Jan.
Well, I'll ask you all the same question that I asked Matt, and that is, I mean, you're not some fly-by-night construction company. Turnstone signs are all over Rehoboth. So I do not understand in my wildest dreams why you all didn't go back to the city and explain what the issues were and discuss it with them. It was like talking to a teenage boy, you know? Take the car without permission and ask forgiveness later. And that's what I'm very uncomfortable about, frankly and honestly. I don't get it. I don't understand when you ran into problems, when there were issues, that you just didn't go back to the city and discuss it with them and discuss options with them.
You want to put that into form
And that's
of
a question.
Yeah.
Why
question.
didn't you?
We did go back to the city to discuss the issues we were having with the grades. So that had to do more with the interpretation of the flood zone and the elevations we needed for the driveways. As far as the sidewalk, in the end, when we had our landscaping done and everything else, it was easiest to soften up that grade with that landing. And we considered that a sidewalk, which was on the plans as it was anyway. So it was basically interpretation of between a sidewalk, a landing, and what's attached to the house and protruding. I mean, you see all around town where you break up the grade with a couple steps. You know, I guess in our eyes, it wasn't attached directly to the house, and we interpreted it a little differently. I mean, it's when you're trying to figure out how to get from here to here, you know, and not, you know, mess up this part of the elevation, not mess up this part of the elevation, that is the easiest solution. Like Aaron said, doing a long sidewalk going like that just didn't work. And it looks better.
It actually stands out to me like a sore thumb from the rest of the neighbor sidewalks because they're much smaller and they're much less unobtrusive.
And that's one of the, I mean, our neighbor's lot to the left is about 1.5 feet higher than the grade of this house because they didn't have to comply with the flood zone back in the day where they built it.
When you say to the right or left, are you facing the house?
The one to the left was higher.
Facing, as you face
Well,
the
as you're
house, it's
facing
on the
your
left.
house, as you're
The
facing
left,
your house to
correct.
the left.
Yep.
And then the one on the right is the one on the corner.
And that was higher as well.
If you use west or east, people would probably understand.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm finished, thank you.
Okay. Mark, I'm going to turn to you for questions.
I think it's self-explanatory. I guess I would have the same question of why didn't you stop as soon as you saw you had a problem and call the city and say, what alternatives do we have? Instead of just continuing and spending all the money that you obviously spent.
Like I said, in our eyes, it was a sidewalk breaking up the grade. So we had a landing there. You know, it's the same thing as, you know, it's the steps come down to a landing, and that's just part of the landscaping there.
So if you do not get this variance, what's Plan B? What would you do to fix it?
Elevator. I have no idea.
I mean,
I mean, it's
you could make
obviously
that into a
Mr.
sidewalk,
Mossman's not here, and it would be up to him.
Okay.
You know, what we would do. I don't want to, you know, speak for him right now. He wasn't able to make it.
I have no other questions.
Okay. Edie?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
So when did what I'm calling the front-end plan change from the approved site plan of December 2023 to what was built?
It was about when we were working out the driveway height. So.
Midsummer, early summer.
Yeah, it was probably like maybe 45 days before completion.
So when was that?
August,
Okay.
end of July, somewhere around there.
Okay, July, August. And whose idea was it to not go to the city?
Like I said, it wasn't
don't
a
think
question
they're
at the
gonna
time that we thought it was an issue for the city. It was just interpretation of the code at the time. And we have, you know, obviously people there working on it that I've been building in town for 20 years. So it wasn't something that I felt was an issue, considering the grade and what we had to do there.
So you were the person who looked at it and said, this is just
Me
a
amongst
sidewalk?
Other people, including the landscapers, yes.
Okay. So no one from the building inspector's office looked at a new plan or a new set of thoughts and said, yeah, go ahead and build that?
No.
And I think you've answered.
I mean,
think-
I don't think there's even, I mean, when we do that, we don't, even if there's landscaping changes, if it's, you know, there's not usually a resubmittal required if there's something small.
But obviously, this isn't small.
Considering if you're calling it to the code, if you're saying it that way, yes, but interpretation, like I said, it wasn't.
But you are an established builder here, and so you are more familiar with the code than lots of other folks. And
Yeah,
so
but do I- yeah.
hypothetically, you would, if there was something that was gray, you might have,
It didn't
or
appear gray at the
turnstone.
time. Like I said, we're coming down to a landing from two steps to a landing and then a grade change. It could be a patio, it could be anything else out there. It's just the other two steps are the problem, and that was considered a way to get the grade to change.
And it's not uncommon. We've done this practice before where we have steps in the sidewalk and it's never been an issue. I don't know if it's because they're closer together. I don't know if that changes the rule, if it's a 3 foot and then you have a step and another 3 foot and you have a step. So it's unclear to us. We certainly weren't trying to avoid or evade the city. We don't want to be sitting here. We thought we were.
That's
well
not even a
within our
question.
rights.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're always, you know, there's,
We stayed within the lot coverage.
Yeah.
We took up the same amount of lot coverage for the front walkway as what was submitted, so there was certainly no intention to evade.
And I think you've answered this too. If you looked at any other options that either the owner, Mr. Mossman, or you looked at, either before this was discovered on September 10th or since, have you looked at anything you would do, either totally different or an ability to modify what has been built and is sitting there today?
So when Corey Schenko made us aware of the issue, he basically, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but he felt that there was hardship, and he suggested that we submit for an appeal, and basically said if that doesn't work, then we can come back to something else. I honestly don't know how we would overcome the elevation change. I know Matt had said he had some
yeah,
ideas.
you mentioned
I'd
something,
love to
Matt, I
hear
don't know
them,
what.
but we
what
can't.
else we could do.
can't ramp and we can't move the stairs.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, I just, one at a time.
Okay, sorry.
And this was a follow-up, which doesn't exactly happen, but isn't exactly true, but you'll see. I said if you have explored any options whatsoever since then, have you looked at how any of them would meet code? But you said you haven't really explored yet, so that's a moot point.
Well, I think the testimony was, you're not sure that there is a solution.
we've not been able to come up with one so far.
Okay. So the application seems focused over and over again on the number of steps, not the totality of the landing steps and their setback distance violation, because it's really a distance violation. It's not a number of steps violation. I know they're connected. I do know that. The application also seems to ignore the issue of the changing the approved site plan and building a non-approved structure without notifying the city. But you've said, I understand what you've said is that you felt it was a non-issue, it was a sidewalk, so I understand your reasoning, but that's all that I have.
Okay, thank you, Edie. My first question, are you in agreement with the building inspector's report that Matt issued?
The only thing
It's not a trick question, it's just, I just want to make
the
sure.
basis of it, sure. The only thing that we're not sure of is that there are other remedies.
Okay. Is this your first flood zone construction? Okay, so you've done it before. Okay. Mr. Ryan, you alluded to interpretation. Can you please again restate your interpretation of this and maybe where you thought it was one way in
The
the
two
city?
stairs that were protruding come down to a landing, that 5-foot landing, okay? From that point, you know, you're coming from the grade is why we have the 2 extra steps. So we're coming from the driveway to that landing. We're attaching to the landing. We figured at that point that was more of a sidewalk. That's originally what that is a sidewalk right there.
So you believe those 2 steps to, I guess, the left of that little landing
To the landing.
are part
correct.
of
Not to the
sidewalk,
porch.
are part of sidewalk?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to get that
Excuse me, Barry, if I
interpretation.
can, so you mean these 2 steps?
Correct.
This is your picture, I'm not
Closest to the
introducing
ground,
anything.
closest to the ground.
You're talking about these
Yeah.
2 steps, you're saying are part, well, he says these 2 steps are part of the landing.
Are part of the
part of the
sidewalk.
Part of the
Sidewalk.
sidewalk. Excuse me. So the gentleman is saying that these bottom 2 steps are part of the sidewalk leading to the landing. Did I state that correctly?
Correct.
Okay.
And when he said earlier that the 2 steps that were protruding, those are the ones that lead to the landing from above.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
No.
Talking about the ones that are, I'm sorry, I think he was saying the ones on top of the landing going to the main
Yeah,
house.
that's what I meant. That's what I meant to say.
So,
So when you were referring to 2 steps protruding, you were referring to
Yes,
the
they're
2.
the 2 steps, correct.
Yeah.
The other 2 were part of the landscape.
Okay.
maybe if we say these top 2 steps, which are attached to the entry,
Correct,
are the ones that protrude.
correct.
Then there is the landing. Then there are the bottom 2 steps, which you felt were part of the sidewalk. Is that stated the way you
That's
would
correct.
state it? Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thanks,
Okay.
Barry, sorry.
Thank you. And I know Matt did mention that he believes there are options, he said plural, exist. So you have no other designs considering it incorporating in part of the porch. You have extra FAR, you have extra front porch coverage that you could use. You know, in other words, would you be willing to go back and meet with, should this fail, go back and meet with Matt for possible solutions from the city?
I mean, I don't even think we could inset them because we wouldn't have enough, yeah, we wouldn't have enough egress out of the front door if we tried to recess the steps into the landing.
So you're
into the
stating
top
a
porch.
danger issue?
Correct,
Safety.
correct. It wouldn't pass
issue.
code, yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you. And the obvious, the exceptional practical difficulty here. Please state it.
It's just not feasible at this point to take care of it that way. Are you talking about as far as,
Yeah, as Delaware law tells us, what is the, not theoretical, but what is the issue with correcting this?
what is the issue? We just don't have a good solution for it. There's no other way to do it, is what we found.
Okay,
We don't have enough room to get all the elevation changes by code.
okay, thank you. Real quick question, I don't know if it's really applicable, but the 2 recessed areas on the left and the right of the house, those steps, I mean, since you changed the elevation, I mean, they're all, not that there's any, they're all, okay, good there. All right, and that was it for my questions. Okay. All right, anything else, and the public does not wish to speak? Okay, so I'm going to close down. We may have a question for Matt or for you, if in part of our debate here or discussion, and other than that, we will now discuss it among ourselves. Edie, Mark, Jan, you want to start us off here?
Well, I mean, I can say pretty much unequivocally that I cannot support this variance, that I don't think it's an exceptional practical difficulty. When you say there's no solution, I'm sorry, there's always a solution. You may not like the solution, but there's always a solution. I think looking at the rest of the properties around them, nobody has that stuff going into the setbacks, and I don't think it's going to seriously impact the neighboring properties. So that's,
How you feel?
that's how I feel. I think that this is not, Joe Smith Builders. This is Turnstone, who's an experienced builder in Rehoboth, and I actually find it extraordinarily difficult to think that the landing and the 2 steps was included as part of the landscaping.
Thank you, Jan.
I'm sympathetic to the situation with the floodplain, and I understand that. I wish that they had stopped midstream and gone back to the city and looked at an alternate rather than finish it out and then find that it was a problem. As far as the 4 quick checks that we use, I don't think that it really causes a problem for any of the neighbors. I don't think that it causes a problem for the area in which it is. It still remains residential and so forth. And I think that there is a handicap there or an exceptional difficulty now that it's done. That doesn't make the fact of how it got there any more pleasant, but now that it's there, I understand that it would be a substantial problem to move it or to come up with another solution. So that's where my thinking is at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Edie, some thoughts?
Well, I look at our quick check factors, and the nature of the zone, R1, there's no problem there. The character and use of the immediate vicinity, no problem. It would fit in that. Would the removal of the restriction negatively impact the surrounding properties? Not that I see. However, I too am stuck with the exceptional practical difficulty. I feel this is a needs-based request. No code-compliant options have been explored. In fact, it seems to have been somewhat of an attitude of build it first and hope it forces the city to accept it to stay. I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but it may not be the minimum relief necessary. The variance as requested may not be the minimum relief necessary to solve the issue. There don't seem to have been an exploration of other code compliant options to cancel or minimize the encroachment. There's no real hardship mentioned other than kind of we want to keep it the way we already built it because that works. I'm not saying that doesn't work. I'm just wondering what else could work. And I share Jan's thought here, with such an innovative and successful builder as Turnstone, I'm sure that a code-compliant solution can be found to solve this other than granting the variance.
Thank you, Edie. And my thoughts, again, with the quick checks, number 1 and number 2 are easily met. Number 3 has me concerned because, the neighboring properties, this does jut out. So I do think there's a slight impact. The hardship, the one thing that stuck out in my mind is the first survey was 2019. Clearly identified the flood zone issue. If you look how the house was built on the lot, you had lots of room to move it back. So, yeah, who thinks of where they're setting the foundation, bringing it right up to that edge? Of course, you can't move the house back. Well, technically, you could move it, but you're not going to move the house back. But lost that advantage to what may have given you more room to get down to grade. I'm just having a tough time thinking if the city's saying there are possible solutions, maybe you could have done something, with the front porch space. Matt said he has seen designs where they include that to get the steps in. I was hoping you could get it off the steps off to the side, but you said that you cannot. I'm having a tough time seeing an exceptional practical difficulty here with possible solutions with meeting with the city to get this compliant. And, it's a tough one for me. So that's where I'm at. My head's at on this one. So I don't know if Jan, Edie, Mark, you want to make a motion?
I move that we deny the variance as stated.
Okay.
I second.
Okay. All right. Let's take a vote on it and we'll hear your explanations. Mark, I'm going to start with you.
All right, can I hear the motion again so I know if it's a nay or yay?
Deny the variance.
Deny the variance.
You want to add more to that?
No.
Just
Based on the quick check factors as I stated in my comments a few moments ago in our discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Edie.
I vote to deny the variance.
You're voting to deny it based on?
Based on the quick check factors, and as you explained, it goes all the way back to the fact that it could have been put back further in the first place when there was plenty sufficient time to look at it. I think you made a good point.
Edie?
I vote to deny the variance. Based on the quick check factors, as I mentioned, 1 and 2 are no problem. Number 3, I'm not sure if it would affect the neighborhood, but I see no exceptional practical difficulty to support it.
All right, thank you, Edie. Jan?
I vote to deny the variance for the reasons stated. I do think, looking at the rest of the houses in the neighborhood, their steps are very different, but I don't really see an exceptional practical difficulty.
Thanks, Jan. And I'm in kind of agreement with Jan. So number 1 and number 2, quick check factors, number 1 and number 2, I'm in agreement with. I do think there's some impact to the neighboring properties as well. It is a beautiful house. Don't get any, I think we would all agree to that, but I have a hard time with the exceptional practical difficulty. Going all the way back to 2019, things could have been done differently. The fact that, could have worked earlier with a solution with the city. So I'm going to vote no on the variance and in agreement with the rest of the board. So again, it's a beautiful house. Hope you can meet with the city and come up with a solution.
Excuse me, Barry, you're voting no on the variance?
No,
No,
he voted.
I'm in agreement. I'm voting no. I'm in agreement with the denial of the variance. Thank you, Edie, for clarifying that.
You're voting yes to deny the variance.
Voting yes
I'm
on the-
voting
on the-
yes to deny.
Okay.
Yes to deny.
Thank you. King's English.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for.
You didn't say the motion. Do you have to say that?
The motion to deny the variance passes 4-0. Thank you. Okay, well, we did our housekeeping work, and I don't think we have anything. Ann, we have 2 cases in November, or 1? Possibly 3. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. 3 and 4.